Heave away, Royo, oh, Royo, ground captain, where we bound from, we are bound from Royo ground.
Hello and welcome to the Shanty Show. Well, a bit of a sad episode today as we mourn and pay our respects to the last Shantyman, George Tull 12 Frederick, who passed away last Tuesday, May the 6th, at the age of 79. And so I'm Stefan from Pressgang Mutiny. I'm joined by James and Tim, and we have three guests who knew Tull 12 very well, and we're really pleased to have them here to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about Tull 12 and his life and the impressions that he left on the people he encountered. And so first off, we've got Mr. Vincent Reid, a member of the Barrouallie Whalers and a close friend of Tull 12. We've got filmmaker and producer Akley Olton here as well, who featured Tull 12 in his film Medulu, as well as our unreleased documentary about the Barrouallie Shanties. And of course, we've got musicologist and Shantyman Dan Lanier, who met Tull 12. Well, I'll let him tell that story a little bit later on, but was instrumental in helping the music of Barrouallie and Tull 12 as well be known by the broader Shanty worlds. Thanks for being here, guys. I wish it was under happier circumstances, but it's really nice to see you all again.
Well, and it's called life.
Yeah, it's called life. Yeah. Vincent, maybe I could start with you, if you wouldn't mind. We did an episode and an interview with you before, and we had Tull 12 on that. But you've known him for a long time, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about him and his life and how he got into shanties and whaling and all of that.
Well, I first met George Tull 12 Frederick. It's about 25 years ago when myself and Dan Lanier, who's here with us, journeyed to Barrouallie to look for Shantymen who were interviewed by Roger Abrams in 1966. I remember this thing. I talk about it a lot. And when we got to Barrouallie, we started to find that a few of the persons who were pictured on Roger Abrams' book at the cover picture were dead. But the person that was at the forefront of the picture was Tull 12. And we found him after finding the captain who was the primary supplier of information for that interview that took place in 1966. And then he told us about Tull 12. He pointed him out, and he was at the front of the book. He was at the forefront of the picture and most recognizable. Interestingly, I put some pictures up on Facebook, and I also put the cover of the book. Tull 12 did not change. From 21, he had the same face right up to the day we found him and the shanty started. That was in 2001. That's when we met. That's when I met Dan. That's when I met George for the first time. And immediately, Dan made arrangements and got George and a few other persons who were shantymen to the States, to Mystic Seaport Museum, to present the shanties. It was not something that your heirs, for us people in the Caribbean and for people outside of Barrouallie, it was not something that your heirs would easily gravitate to. So it was a learning process for me to understanding and accepting the shanties. But George hammered it out for me, constantly singing, constantly saying, "Shanty boy, shanty!" And he had it. He had us going. That's one of my early memories of George. That's when, for me, you would consider being shanty. I mean, he went out at age 20, 21. And you ask the question is being asked, what exactly, or how did you become a shantyman? I believe all the whalers who went out during that era were shantymen. They had to sing. It was part of what they had to do, and they couldn't avoid it. So they were all shantymen in their own rights. But George excelled at this with his ability to sing and having the love to project his voice. He excelled at it. He just excelled at it.
He was my impression of meeting him the first time, and that was on the streets of Barrouallie. And I remember Danny saw you and came in for the big sort of high five and hug. And then the two of you immediately burst into song.
Row,
And that when we were chatting with him the whole time, it was this combination of, talking, and he was obviously a joker as well. But he would just throw in shanties into his daily way of being. You just see that he'd steeped in this. I don't know whether that was, because we were there and we're there to talk about shanties with him, or if that was just what he was like. But Dan, you knew him. I came to know him socially as well. Is that an accurate impression?
Yeah, well, he was, as Vince was saying, George was an exceptional man, and he was exceptional in many ways. He was very bright, read every day. He read the Bible every day for sure, and a very good communicator. And he recognized, without anyone telling him, he recognized intuitively that music was a great way to communicate across cultures, across oceans. And so that was sort of the default mode for him to relate to other people that liked music, was through song and through jokes and stories and all those other things that he was steeped in lore. He came from a whaling family. So he lived and breathed Barrouallie culture from birth. A very important family. He had an aunt that owned 2 boats, and so he couldn't escape that. But he could have done many things. He worked as a policeman. He spent some time in Trinidad. He worked in the hospital. But when he would tell his life story, he came back to the sea on multiple occasions, because that was his...
Always.
Yes. You can elaborate on that, Vince, but that was very important to him, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, so, you featured Tall 12 in your film Medulla. Is that how you came to know him, and why him in that role?
Well, I was introduced to him by Mr. Vincent Reid. He I guess by that time the trips to Mystic Seaport and all of that stuff had already happened, and the legend of the musical Shantyman had already being established. So it was Mr. Reid and a lady, Carlita Daniel, who had asked me to come down to the jetty to, just do an interview with him. They were trying to kind of develop a program from the government to sort of preserve this kind of culture. And yeah, so I had gone, and I don't know if it was in the evening because of the light on that jetty. Like, you guys know how the light is on the jetty. It's like golden light and the water is like super calm. Or if it was because I was, freshly back from Cuba and I had like Ernest Hemingway on the brain. But I saw our version of the Old Man and the Sea, and like that evening. And then that was literally the evening that like the concept of a sea shanty was revealed to me, like I had known like pirate lullabies, like 15 Men on it, the things you would hear on Disney. Like, I had known about those, and I had known about like Harry Belafonte and that kind of music that is kind of like a sea shanty, but I didn't really know what a sea shanty was until that evening, and it blew my mind because there's just so many things about life on an island that sometimes you take for granted, and it just blew my mind that something so powerful could live in this community. Yeah, then and there I figured I had to figure out a way to to enshrine it, or to do something with it. So I started to explore how I could develop a project about it. With Mr. Reed, encouragement, 100% all the way. Up to now, he's like asking me, what am I working on next?
So we were chatting a little bit before we hit record on this, and Akley, you were sort of, I mean, I find, your relationship with Tall 12 really interesting, and Vincent, you too, right? Because there's a generational difference there, and you're saying in many ways that's emblematic of sort of a cultural shift that's taken place on the island.
You have to understand Tall 12 a little more to grapple with that question. He was set in his ways. I want to use the term stubborn, but it's not a negative. I think he was a very stubborn fella. He was set in his ways, and the transition, though he grappled and walked with it, the transition that technology interjected between generations, it was something he didn't quite fit in with. And I get that from him not being on the road among the youths, trying to show or teach the old ways, the Shantian ways. He stayed with his peers. That is a sign that you find it difficult to be around the youths, be around because of the way they are. It is totally different now, today, than what it was back then. Totally different. And if you're not of the late 60s and 70s, you would not be able to relate too well with the young folks, with the youths. You see, the people of the late 60s and all of the 70s is in between the transition, right? And so they can relate to the old and they can relate to the young because they're in the middle of it. Tall 12 kept with his peers, and that would have affected him, in my opinion, right down to the end because he ended up being generally alone at home. If he couldn't get down the road because of mobility issue with his knees or something like that, because of pain, there was no youth real like passing to check up on all 12. There was no grandchildren around. No, he just kind of divorced himself from that side, that social section of life. He had family, yes, he had a son, he has children, but he liked being alone. And I think it was more or less from not wanting to get too much in the young people business. That's what he said. He don't really want to get too much in the young people business. So he more or less stayed home. I don't know. That to me can be hard. It could mess with your mind, put you in a place where you become almost angry.
And
There
Mr.
were,
Yeah,
seemed to me
But
to be
right to the end,
so
he was alone.
to
yeah.
me to be so full of energy and so almost youthful himself that I'm surprised to hear that he would have had some difficulty interacting with the younger generation since.
Yeah, but he has a way because that's Tall 12 had a way about him because of his antics and his ability to joke and to play. He would still have had a connection, but he didn't explore it. I mean, he didn't quite recognize it because he would go down the road and people would shout him and everybody would know Tall 12. He even said after Pressgang came and left, that he always met children on the street who would want him to sing, right? So he had that connection. Yes, he was recognized in his area and so forth. But he really liked being, in spite of the antics and the jokes and so forth, he preferred to be with his peers than to be too much around the younger folks. And
Yeah.
and remember, at his age, his peers are few.
Yeah. So you're saying he could be an entertainer amongst younger people, but maybe not so comfortable being close personally.
Well, there's like a strong generational disconnects, amongst like the different like subsets on the island. Like I was, what we were talking about earlier was really like the difference between like the West Indian and the Caribbean. The Caribbean are people who are born in a like democratic independent state, and the West Indians, they were more colonial, so they had more of the British sentiment and the British value. So good manners, being mindful how you speak to elders, not only the British but the older African communities as well, how you speak to the elders. You used to approach it with a little bit more, more respect and more reverence. And you find like later, like maybe my generation is one of the last generations that could really connect to the older folks. But you find like from the 90s going forward, there's been a kind of like degrade when it comes to like some community value. And the older folks would often just well, we young people would say they're just ignorant. They're just ignorant because like in terms of how they would react to our behavior, which they would see as rude. And
Exactly.
it's yeah, and it's
Exactly.
complex because even simple things like I'm a very articulate person now, but as a child, if I was this articulate, depending on the situation, I would have get told, you're a child, you're supposed, and some of these are kind of like
Act like a
things that,
child.
yeah, exactly. Some of these are things that were kind of like that I know now was kind of like not so useful when it comes to like helping a person to grow and to heal and to be confident. But yeah, but there were these generational disconnects between the different eras and different kinds of Caribbean island life that manifested. And Tall 12,
And that would have
Tall 12, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have affected him more in the later stage than early up. In the last probably 4 or 5 years, it would have affected him more than any other time, the disconnect. But in spite of his popularity and his mannerism and the way it was, he had some difficulties with that.
Yeah.
How much it affected, well, it would have affected his overall life. But nevertheless, he was just a powerful guy. He
I
was
think
out of this world.
connection in
There's no
general.
match.
Sorry, I interrupted Vince.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It makes me think of how much connection in general would have changed during his lifetime. When he was a young man, I feel like the town of Barrouallie would have been quite an isolated place in the world from the rest of the world, with very little connection even to the rest of St. Vincent. If I'm correct in saying so, I believe that even the connection by road wasn't established that well until
That's right. Yeah.
fairly
Yeah,
recently.
the changes.
And then
Yeah, the changes, the development.
And then I think when he had
Yeah.
a chance to tour with Shanties and getting to see parts of the world he probably otherwise would have never set foot on, or much less had an impression on the people that he had an impression on so many people during those tours. And now in current times where young people who live in small town barely have in many ways the whole world at their fingertips through the internet, and
Right now.
how much that would have changed, during his life from being such an isolated place, even locally, to being something where.
Well, I'll tell you this. He made attempt to be on par, and that came with the fact that his smartphone, and he often wanted to have data so that he could use WhatsApp and he could look at videos, follow some stuff on YouTube, and he was always interested in that, having that connection. So he was not a senior citizen who was blind or totally ignorant of the technology and what it afforded him. He embraced it. And he had upgrades of phones too, so that he can keep up with the trend, with the connections, with the technology as it. So he did venture into that side, into that part of it.
I wanted to sort of touch a little bit on the intergenerational kind of dynamics, because we're speaking of Tall 12, of course, towards the end of his life here. But as we mentioned a little earlier, first recordings I believe that were done of the Barrouallie Whalers would have been 1966 with Roger Abrams, and I believe 2 years later Jack Stanesco came down and did another set of recordings. And so as Vince, I think, as you said, Tall 12 would have been like 21 in 1966.
Yeah, around there.
And
Yeah.
I think, as Dan was saying, he was part of the recordings, but I don't think he was featured yet as a lead shantyman. He would have been singing on the answer parts. So it's interesting to think of him as a youth that was sort of learning this tradition, and then to think of him as sort of the torchbearer and the in many ways the last of the Barrouallie Whalers. And I know that in some ways Tall 12 would sing some of the repertoire, that maybe the songs that resonated more with him or the ones that meant something to him, and some of the other ones even in the studio. I remember Dan asking about certain songs and he would say, "Oh no, like that was someone else would sing that song."
That's right. Yeah. He had particular favorites, and we all know them, ones at which he excelled when he sang them, and that were just near and dear to him. But I think he was a fellow for whom the whole lore of whaling, the whole cultural complex, was dear to his heart, and he held it close. And it mattered to him long past the time that it mattered to most of his relations or most of the other people in Barrouallie. He cared about not just shanties, but he cared about Nancy stories, rig plays, the stories of the supernatural, jumbies and duppies, and we heard him speak about that in the studio.
Under the animals, we said to have a rooftop party, but only those with horns are invited. Dog and goat were very friends. The dog said, "Me can't go. You have no horn." Goat said, "I will build a horn give you." Goaty and dog were very good friends. But Goaty can't go because he have no one to build a horn give him. On the boat, 9 out of 10 times, a dog and the boat One place to hear the for, on the bow. Bow of the boat. And they go to the bow. Now the captain was the cattle, because he had the longest one. When the boat out, with a certain distance, go to your show. Hey! There's a church on board! Examine your hands! Captain said, stop the boat. What you say? There's a church on board! Examine your hands! Okay, Captain start to go. Your hand good. You have a hand. When you reach a dog, you can't get the hand one foot overboard. Now the good here shows I didn't jump up now. Dog a swim. But the habitual practice that dog have, anytime he swim in and reach on the shore, he have to roll in the sand. If the dog didn't roll in the sand, he'll catch a goatee. Goatee lead out, dog behind. Goatee lead out, dog behind. Goatee lead out, dog behind. But the goatee know where his hole is. As soon as the goatee do so in the hole, the dog was in time. The tail was out. Up! But that the goatee tail. From thence, the story ends. So goatee have no tail. That's how the goatee lost his tail.
There was no accident. That was important to him, and so he kept those things and was happy to share them. And that was really a special thing about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, he starts to represent that Caribbean in the Harry Belafonte movies. You know, like the older, more traditional Caribbean, and also like in a way sometimes a more raw version of what we have now. I mean, nowadays I can't think of a person who would really go out there and wrestle with a whale in the way that they do. I don't even think they do it in Beckway. I mean, they caught a humpback the other day, and some of what I saw anyway. I don't even think they do it in that way anymore. You know, it's not the same like risk or not the same leap in terms of what the human is required to do or the bravery that's required or the skill. You know, so yeah, I think his life represents a transition from a more colonial Caribbean to a kind of modernity. Right now, we have to make an assessment of what we've gained and what we've lost. One of the things that stuck with me, one of the things that he really said to me was the motor engine. You know, like when people earn enough money to buy a motorboat, they didn't have to sing anymore, you know, and that forever is like it's ringing like the engine of the machine in my head because such beautiful music is destroyed by this monotonous sound. But at the same time, such progress and development is possible. That's what I keep thinking about when I think about Tonto.
Well, there seems to be a duality there. I mean, progress is sort of unstoppable and it brings about many positive things, but it makes me think perhaps maybe that's why we have less storytelling nowadays. Maybe that's why we don't gather as much for entertainment because we can be entertained in a more individual kind of way. So interesting to reflect on that perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Tall 12 was one of those guys in a really unique position in history, and obviously, we knew him through a very narrow aspect of his life, which was the Shanties, and then through that a bit more broadly into the world of whaling, and obviously Vince and Akley, you have much deeper connections with him, culturally and personally as well. But the position that he was in his life, we often refer to him as the last Shantyman.
He often said that.
So, the thing that occurs to me is like, that position in history in a sort of way, like he becomes the tradition, right? Like he's the last real authentic voice on all of that. And I guess my question is, what is his legacy? What does that mean for the future of Shanties, the Barrouallie Shanties and the Barrouallie Whalers?
I feel I could see it. I feel like it's interesting what you guys do as a group and how you navigate sea shanties globally, as a genre. And I think there is a space for a sea shanty kind of sound that is a mix with soca that could be a natural part of the sound of this island. That could translate some of the same sentiment from back in the day and still feel kind of islandy. I feel it's possible. But what we need now is for like young voices, hopefully voices from the community to like take up the songs and do that, and who knows? Maybe Mr. Reid and I would have to play a part in that, but it would just be I definitely feel like there is space in the world for Caribbean sea shanties to grow. This is what I would have to say to you. Roll them girls from Califa to Dover. Spend my money where? With the hoes on shows. Cause what? That's a
All good.
soca song. It's ready.
Yeah, I am not sure how much space or interest there might be for blending shanty with our more popular genres. Shanty is an intangible heritage. It is listed in a document that I did for UNESCO on the cultural and historical heritage sites and sounds, intangible and intangible, tangible and intangible heritage of St. Vincent. So it's listed in the document as an intangible heritage. Um, for that reason, and it's nice to add other genres to blend stuff, but I I am more interested in seeing young people from specifically Barrouallie coming up with their own shanties. Shanty is yeah, I want them to come up with it. Just like how you have a calypso competition, they should have a shanty competition in Barrouallie. And the young people of Barrouallie should come up with shanties. That's how I want to see shanty. That's how I want to remember, to keep the memory of Tall 12 by hearing people coming up with new shanties, just reflecting the days being at sea. It's hard. I know it's going to be a difficult task, but that is what I want. That is what I would love to see.
Well, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think it's so significant that really Barrouallie and St. Vincent is the last place on earth where these songs were a living tradition up until the early 1970s or so. At the time that musicologists are writing books saying, these are these old songs that we collected, and it's like, well, hold on, this is still happening right now. And I know when we're in the studio, I know Mr. Junior Sutherland was talking about wanting to put some of these songs into the school curriculum.
Where this is concerned, I can actually listen to it, write out the harmonies, write out the melodies and so forth and things. So when our education revolution moves towards music being a degree at the community colleges now, we can be studying the shanties, studying all our traditional values and, cultural aspects and where music is concerned and so forth and things. And I want to be the resource person who would have put all of it.
That's great.
Perhaps that would be a way to sort of raise the awareness, and maybe that's the sort of one of the first steps towards getting the kids aware of it, and then they can sort of create their own. I was just thinking of that. I have this funny memory of seeing my dad. He had an old LP, and it was Ewan McCall and A.L. Lloyd, and it was whaling ballads. And I remember just looking at that as a kid, thinking, like, who would want to listen to this record of old whaling songs? And then fast forward, and I'm obsessed with this kind of thing, but there was that preconception of like why would I listen to this? But there's something so sort of human and accessible and inviting about a lot of these songs that it would be really nice to see people thinking of it in the terms of a living tradition, and something that doesn't necessarily have to be entirely about experiences at sea, but something that's about your life.
We've never done a memorial episode before. I'm trying to ask questions about this, but really, I want to hear from each of you if there's just anything that you feel is important to say or that we haven't covered. And so just would open the floor to that. Maybe Dan, start with you.
I'll just say that I think George left each of us some sort of a legacy that we interpret as it comes to us. As I think about him and my impressions from my various interactions with him, I know that he left me a number of gifts, principally in his singing and his performance. He was, as I said earlier, he was a very skilled communicator. He was a very skilled interpreter and a what I call a cultural diplomat. So when we went to the United States, when he went to France, to the Netherlands, he was always interpreting and presenting his heritage and doing it very skillfully because it came to him easily. He was always exhorting people to make sure we work on our antics. We got to have antics. We've got to be entertaining. Yes, that was important to him. He was a performer in every context. And every context was a little different, but he always excelled and thoroughly enjoyed himself in those settings. And so, as an example of just a model performer, entertainer, there were many lessons there, I think, for all of us. But I hear his voice in my head. When I sing one of his songs, I try to just project that same energy as I did last Tuesday. I sang 7 long years. It was my way of honoring him, and I could just feel his presence, in the song.
That's true. I recognize he always wanted to project the songs to show Shanty important, and he would have always said, we have to make the people like this. We have to present so that they will like it. Come on, energy. He was always like that. He always had that thought, having the energy and the songs, so that people would understand it. People would understand it. People would like it and to sing it. That it was always in him. So somewhere, he went with great enthusiasm, knowing he's going to present the chanties and people hear it. That's something that I would miss. His enthusiasm when that the shanties are known at Barrouallie.
Yeah, I think in my time interacting with him, I saw him go from feeling like nobody cared about sea shanties to him like taking the responsibility to advocate for it and to like claim it. And I guess in the last of the moments that I spent with him, like at the school, and I saw the interaction like with the kids, like even that too was like just like an indicator of like what he wanted. And I think what he wanted is for Barrouallie to be a place where people could come and experience the sea shanty culture. I think that's what he wanted. I think he wanted people to be there on a Friday night performing sea shanties and drinking rum and eating fish. I think that's what he really wanted, and that's the world that he came from. And so I feel like, yeah, in some ways, yeah, I feel like that's the legacy that he has. It's a legacy that's yet to be aspired to because there is like the Bag of Fish Festival, but it still has a way to go, especially now seeing that we'll need to get some new shanty singers.
I wish we were reuniting under better circumstances, but really thank you all for making the time and for sharing your thoughts. I still have some Vincentian rum upstairs, and I think I'm gonna pour myself a glass after this to remember Tall 12. I'm trying to think of ways that people might be able to find out more. There's the Roger Abrams book, Deep the Water, Shallow the Shore. They can check out Barrouallie Whalers. How do they find Madulu? Is that available?
Yeah, it's available. You can check out the trailer on Akley Olton YouTube channel. And also, if you're in North America, you could sign up to the Criterion channel, and it's there. It's on the Criterion channel is a VOD. They have the rights to screen it across North America for the next 3 years. So you could check it out there. If not, feel free to reach out. It's still going to festivals, so it's not like available for people to like watch unless you reach out and I decided to share the link. Yeah.
And we will we're talking about doing a release of the film, the documentary that we filmed together with Tall 12, as well as the music in the studio. It feels like we've just got to get that out into the world now, so we'll do that as well, and people can check out our interview with the Barrouallie Whalers on our channel as well.
Listen to the tracks on Tuesday. And yeah, it was very bittersweet. Obviously, very, very sorry to hear about Tall 12's passing. But hearing his voice again put a smile on my face, and it really brought me back and really made me grateful for the experiences of not just getting to hang out with Tall 12 and get to know him and sing with him, but to get to meet everyone here, and the time we spent together. It was it kind of happened so quickly, and it was really special to look back on. And
no, I think it's good. And actually thinking about it right now, like we might have what we need to secure Barrouallie's sea shanty legacy for the future. because what you guys have is recordings of the actual words from Tall 12's mouth, and we could transcribe those and turn them into like have the word the lyrics for each song, and then we could use that to teach people in the community, the words that Tall 12 song. And depending on how you guys want to roll out your release, who knows, maybe we could do a show in Barrouallie, sometime in the future.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
man.
much for organizing this, Press Gang. This
Yeah.
it's up to
Thank you so
it's to
much.
you to having.
Thank you all. Yeah, thank you for making the time.
7 years into the ocean. Roll, my rolling river. 7 years I never touched water. We are bound away from this world of misery. Misery, I come to tell you. Captain cry out, roll, my rolling river. Saddle fast, me bowman answer. We are bound away from this world of misery. When I hit at it 40, roll and shiver. When I enter the second, she spoke plenty water.